So the third significant case that I handled was Burns versus Kerr. David Burns is a dentist in Shelbyville, Tennessee. He found out about my involvement with this issue and he hired me and Bob Reeves. The case was removed to federal court in eastern Tennessee, and off we went against what was, at least at that time, the largest manufacturer of dental amalgam in the country, Kerr Corporation. The defendant's trying to kick the causation evidence presented by the plaintiff out before we have to go to trial. And I'd gotten pretty good at this. We won. And we won across the board. They challenged each of our experts. I'd put together what I thought was another dream team, and there were challenges to each and every one of those experts and their proffered testimony. And the court found that all of this was reliable, all of this was valid, and all of it would be admissible at trial. The next thing we received kind of surprised me. It was something that I'd contemplated before I took the case, and I thought that I could overcome it. I was concerned about it, but in the back of my mind I was thinking, I'm really working too hard here. I don't think it's something that Kerr will ever present. What they did was present evidence that their warning was adequate. Kerr's warnings are published in material safety data sheets that they're required to distribute with their product. Those same warnings, I think, appear on their instructions and package inserts, but the point is they've got these warnings. And I'm oversimplifying, but the warning essentially said that mercury is a neurotoxin. Mercury does this, mercury does that. And it was at least arguable that all the things that Kerr was warning about happened to Burns. So Kerr's position was, this is a dangerous product. We told you it's a dangerous product, and the case ought to be dismissed because you've been adequately warned. Well, don't think we weren't ready for that. We were ready for that. Because I'd asked Kerr's representatives who had been produced in deposition, what do these warnings have to do with mixed dental amalgam? And the answer was absolutely nothing, because the warnings were only about mercury. Okay, little history here. When dentists go to dental school, they're taught that mercury is dangerous, but they're also taught that mixed dental amalgam is completely inert. It's the proverbial egg that's baked into the cake. The egg's never going to come out of the cake again. Well, that's not true in the context of mixed dental amalgam, but it's certainly true that dental students are taught that the mercury in mixed dental amalgam is inert. And so when a dentist goes in to grind out an amalgam filling, he is creating tremendous quantities, especially if he's not taking precautions that most dentists don't take. He is creating tremendous quantities of mercury particulate. The particulate is bound to the other constituents of amalgam, but the drill on the handpiece is rotating at 650,000 rounds a minute or second. I can't remember, I think it's a minute. It pulverizes the surface of the amalgam filling and creates these little baby amalgams that are flying around in the air. And that particulate is easily absorbed into the lung, has an average size of 2 microns. That's smaller than a bacterium. Can you imagine how small these little pieces are? And then the issue in the case became, what's the ultimate fate of this particulate? Is it absorbed, and are the pharmacokinetics the same as mercury vapor? And the answer is no, it's not the same. But unfortunately, it's not a subject that's been very well studied, to my surprise. But Mark Richardson put together what I thought was an excellent argument, a very well documented argument, and we showed that the vast majority of this particulate, if not all of it, ultimately what became mercury in the bloodstream and was absorbed in much the same way as, and the pharmacokinetics were such, that would mimic mercury vapor. Okay, it's a little bit different. It gets into the bloodstream a little bit differently. It separates from the other amalgam constituents a little bit differently, but ultimately the fate is the same, we argued. Mark later took all this data and published a paper on it, and a peer-reviewed paper. You can read about it. I don't think he ever mentions the Burns case in this paper, but it is the Burns case in a nutshell. And so that data is now published and available. But Burns was absorbing tremendous amounts, thousands of micrograms of mercury a day, and ultimately began to suffer very predictable consequences. So, back to our case, Kerr tells us its warning is adequate. We say, no, it's not. The vast majority of the mercury going into his system is from this mixed dental amalgam. And it was, and I don't think anyone argued with that. Okay, so is the warning adequate if it only tells them that mercury is poisonous? To my surprise, the district court said, yeah, it is adequate. The manufacturer didn't say that the poisonous mercury would be any less poisonous when mixed with the other dental amalgam constituents. I don't think that's a very good ruling, and I was so confident I could get that overturned that I appealed the decision to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which sits in Cincinnati, Ohio. I flew up to Cincinnati with every expectation that the matter would be reversed. Instead, it was affirmed. The appellate court, in a published opinion, also felt that the adequacy of the warning was such that Barnes was or should have been aware that mixed dental amalgam was completely poisonous. Well, okay, too bad for Dr. Barnes, but the warning everywhere is that this is, without qualification, a dangerous product. Okay, let's talk about one other concept. Dentists, physicians, healthcare providers are bound by law to pass along manufacturer warnings to their patients. So let's look at dental amalgam for a minute. If a dentist decides he's going to place dental amalgam in a patient, under the learned intermediary doctrine, which is in effect in all or virtually all the 50 states, that dentist is obligated to take the manufacturer warning provided to the dentist and show it to the patient, or at least explain it to the patient. If he fails to do so, he can be liable for any adverse result. In other words, the dentist is obligated by law to pass along the warnings to the patient. We know that's not being done. In fact, it's worse than you think. It's prohibited. Dentists not only don't pass along these warnings, they're prohibited from passing along these warnings by a completely different set of laws. If they do pass along these warnings, they are accused of violating ethical codes that prevail throughout all of the 50 states, that violate the model ethical code published by the American Dental Association, and in fact are prosecuted by both arms of the American Dental Association and the dental boards of the 50 states. And those prosecutions have not only occurred, they are continuing to occur today. I've got 5 of those cases in my office right now. Dentists are brought in, attacked, written letters by these dental boards and by arms of the American Dental Association for doing nothing more than warning the American public, their patients and prospective patients, that mercury presents a risk of harm, just like these warnings from Kerr say. And by the way, Kerr is not special here. All the warnings distributed by all the manufacturers of amalgam in this country pretty much say the same thing. They all warn of the devastating effects of mercury and mercury only.